Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our MC, Deb Esslinger.
Good morning. Good morning to everybody that is here today. Are you glad to be here? Yeah, tell your neighbor right now, I am so glad that you are here. Awesome. Now look to the other person on the other side and tell them that you're glad they're here as well. We are so glad that you chose to spend the next 2 days with us at the very first Main Street Summit. Let's give a warm round of applause to the BHS Jazz Band. Didn't they play amazing this morning? I don't know about you, but I was dancing a little bit as I heard them playing Hey Jude. That's been playing back in my mind. My name is Deb Esslinger. For those that don't know me, I'm the Executive Director of Center for Technology and Business here in town. Born and raised here in Bismarck, North Dakota, proud North Dakotan. Very honored to be here with you today to help facilitate these great conversations we're going to have about Main Street and what that means to you, your community, and the state of North Dakota. This interactive summit will provoke new thoughts while showcasing ideas and best practices that build culture in vibrant communities, create infrastructure projects with infill and historic revitalization, and highlight workforce development with educational programs. But before we can move forward, there's a couple housekeeping and things that I want to bring to your attention. Our summit sponsors, we could not do this without them. So thank everybody who was a sponsor for us here today. If you see them, please thank them in person as well. Let's give a big round of applause to our summit sponsors. As many of you know, we have a mobile app. How many of you have already downloaded that? And how come the rest of you haven't, right? We need you to go ahead and download that mobile app. You will find the conference agenda, some presentations, speaker information, and announcements are all going to be provided within that handy mobile app for the summit. If you haven't already, make sure you download it and stay close with the schedule. Connect with the different presentations and the speakers that are in there. If you need to find it yet, it's on your smartphone, and go into the App Store and download Guidebook. When you're searching in Guidebook, you're going to just type in Main Street ND, one word inside the Guidebook app. Or in your package, you'll find a handy flyer. Of course, we don't expect you to memorize this right off here, but go ahead and download that app so you can stay in tune with us. Stay in tune with us through the Summit app. Thank you, Bank of North Dakota, for sponsoring the app with us. And of course, if you prefer a printed agenda, daily agendas will be out at that registration desk. Another thing I want to bring to your attention is your feedback is so important to us. Throughout the summit, we will request your feedback at the end of each session. You'll find these surveys in the app within each session throughout the Schedule tab. This is not only going to help the summit organizers cater and deliver more great summits in future and more information as we get your feedback, but it's going to be a great tool to the speakers as they prepare future presentations as well. There will be paper surveys available for those of you who prefer this method at the end of each session. One last item, we will be live streaming the governor and lieutenant governor's presentation today, and we're going to iCarve them on the mainstreetnd.com website. So you can connect with them later or share them with community members that maybe didn't get to visit in person here today with us. So we want to thank our streaming sponsor, Cardin Global. Before I introduce the governor, let's take a minute to get out of our comfort zones. Do you all like getting out of your comfort zones? Yeah? I heard a couple people screaming. That's awesome. I'd like everyone to stand up. I see a few of you still sitting. Go ahead and stand up. What I want you to do is I want you to shake the person next to you that you don't know, right? We can all cheat and shake the hand of someone that we know. So I want you to get out of your comfort zone, and I want you to shake their hand. And I want you to find out their name and their hometown of where they're from. I'm going to give you a minute to meet a new friend. Okay, did we meet a new friend? Okay, everybody, back to your seat, but don't sit down just quite yet. I'm gonna make you stand for another minute. On the count of 3, I want everyone to shout the name and the hometown of the person that you met so we can hear what a diverse and large group of people we have in this room here today. So here we go. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Thank you. Go ahead and grab your seat. Whew, that is a lot of new friends in a short minute. Imagine how many friends you can make over the next 2 days if you intentionally meet the people that you don't know, get to know them, get to know their communities, and what makes their communities so vibrant and so great. You'll notice that some people here today have a name tag that says Team North Dakota. I know everybody in this room is a Team North Dakota, right? Go North Dakota. But those are employees of the state government and the Main Street team. So I just want to make sure that if you see those folks over the next 2 days, go ahead and say hi, introduce yourself. But really, the challenge is today and tomorrow is to meet new people, is to connect with new people, and not just communicate with them, but truly connect. Find out where they're from, find out where their community is, find out a little bit more about their community, the fun facts, but really take the time to connect, because that's where the magic happens, right? It's before and after. It's during those social times where we can get to know each other and see how we can help each other and make a difference in those communities. So please, when you leave here, I want you to meet 5 or 6 new friends, right, that you can intentionally connect with. And now, I have the honor of introducing our first keynote speaker of the day, Governor Doug Burgum. Doug Burgum took office as the 33rd governor of North Dakota 14 months ago, after his first run for public office. An entrepreneur from Arthur, North Dakota, Governor Burgum is driven by a powerful vision built on a foundation of values: respect for the past, gratitude for the present, and inspiration for the future. His passion for creating smart, healthy communities through vibrant downtowns extends back to nearly 2 decades. In 2000, Burgum literally saved 70,000 square foot former Northern School supply building in downtown Fargo from the wrecking ball, and ultimately donated it to the North Dakota State University for what became Renaissance Hall, home to NDSU's architecture, landscape architecture, and visual art programs, and the anchor for NDSU's high-impact downtown campus. That was the first of a long line of redevelopment projects, which accelerated after he founded the downtown-focused real estate development firm, Kilbourne Group, in 2006. Other historic renovation and infill projects that have intersected with the Burgum family philanthropic work include the Catherine Kilbourne Burgum Center for Creativity within the Plains Art Museum, in addition and enhancements to the stage at Island Park, a mixed-use project that added a second screen to the historic Fargo Theater, and renovation of the historic Pierce Arrow Building, which became the new home for the Family Health Center. Governor Burgum brings a unique set of experiences related to the challenges of building strong communities in North Dakota. And with 3 decades of job creation and global high-tech companies, he has a deep understanding of what it takes to attract and retain the 21st century workforce. With his characteristic focus on gratitude, curiosity, innovation, and collaboration, Governor Burgum is working through the Main Street Initiative to create grassroots movements across cities of all sizes, a movement that will help our communities, our state, and our citizens reach their full potential. It is my honor to welcome our governor, Governor Doug Burgum, to the stage.
Thanks, Deb. Thank you. Great job. Good morning. Let's try that again. I know it's 11 below when I got up this morning, but good morning. Hey, it is so great to have you all here. Thank you so much for being here today. And what an incredible, awesome group we have assembled for this conference. It's possible there's never been this much power to change the future of North Dakota communities located in one room. We've got mayors, we've got the chancellor, we've got Senate Majority Leader Rich Wardner, we've got legislators, we've got community leaders, we've got people representing all of the cabinet agencies in the state of North Dakota. We've got other statewide elected officials that are here. Everybody that we need to help drive decision-making forward in this state is in this room, and we're all here with a common purpose, and that's because we believe that North Dakota has an opportunity to have really an unlimited future. I also want to thank everybody that's worked to put this conference together. I want to thank all of you for taking time to be here away from your other jobs. I know that in our communities we have 64 communities represented from across the state of North Dakota. Give yourselves a hand if you're here from one of those communities. And as Deb said, the people that are here from Team North Dakota, our job is to learn from you, as well as learn from the national speakers we've got coming. Our job is to figure out how we can do a better job of serving you, whether that's health or education or infrastructure. Our Team North Dakota is here to learn from you, so I would encourage everybody that's made their way from the communities across the state to engage with the Team North Dakota members that are here. I know we've also got some students that are here, which is fantastic because they're such an important part of our future. But I also want to just share some special gratitude on behalf of the First Lady Catherine Helgus Burgum and Lieutenant Governor Brent Sanford, who you're going to hear from later this morning, is just to share our personal gratitude about the opportunity to serve all of you, because one thing that we've learned in the last 14 months is that we can make a difference in people's lives every day, and we're grateful every day to get up and have a chance to do that, so thank you. Community matters, which is why all of you are here. And why does community matter to us? Because for all of us, people, like so many of us grew up in small towns in North Dakota, community has a very deep meaning. We knew everybody in our community. We knew our neighbors. We weren't divided by party or age or neighborhoods or high income or low income. We were a community by definition with almost no separation between the people that were in that community. And that kind of community matters more than ever today in the world that we live in. And you're here because I know that you believe that. But it also matters the decisions that we make, because we can make all kinds of decisions that will change the trajectory of our communities. And that's why, again, it's so great that you're here to learn. One of the things about conferences that I've observed over the years is that a lot of people come and they go, hey, this was a great conference, it was amazing, I loved that speaker. What was that person's name? They said something I really valued, but now I'm back at work, I got 100 things going on, I got to get my kids to school, I got an aging parent to take care of, and you lose sight of what you really learned and came from. So we want to have everybody here under the spirit of we can move forward better if we set goals. Is on the center of your table, there's a little sheet in the middle, and it's a very simple little piece of paper. Reach out and find them. It looks like this. It says my goals, and then there's 3 lines. And I'd like to have you have that in front of you. And as we go through today, I mean, by the time I get done with your keynote, you might be like, my goal is to try to figure out what in the heck he was talking about. But you can fill these out as you go through the morning listening to Brent and I. And then when we break for lunch, I want you to do that. There is going to be a quiz. Deb's going to ask you about these later today and tomorrow about how you're doing relative to your goals. But I might, say, pick a learning goal, pick a meet new people goal, pick an advance your community goal. But think about that. Maybe your goal is to share an idea about your community with someone else in the state. But let's all agree together collectively that if we get this many people, close to 650, 700 people here, all with 3 goals, we could accomplish a couple thousand goals here in the next 2 days and help move our state forward. We're, of course, have a number of things going on in our administration. As we talked about at the State of the State, we've got 5 primary strategic initiatives. One of those is the Main Street Initiative, but all of the other ones actually touch Main Street, because how we reinvent our approach to government affects communities. Behavioral health and addiction, which we'll talk about, affects every community in our state. We have an opportunity with enhanced tribal engagement to affect and change the course of our communities. And of course, every single community, we have 64 communities here today. We have nearly 180 school districts in our state. We've got 11 institutions of higher education with distributed learning across cities broader than that. And so that that touches on everybody. And as we go to these communities, one of the things that we learn is the #1 employer in every one of your communities is either usually healthcare or it's education. Those are often the high employers in our state. So you cannot talk about Main Street workforce development and what we've got to accomplish here without touching on the other ones. But today we're going to focus on the Main Street initiative. And this is a whole of government approach. It requires us breaking down the silos. It includes partnerships, not just with government, because government doesn't have all the solutions. Deb thanked all the sponsors that we have here today, but we've also got other partners that are here, whether it's League of Cities, Association of Counties, USDA, federal agency partners. This is a team effort at the federal and the local and the state level for us to accomplish what we need to accomplish. But on the Main Street Initiative, we got 3 pillars, and the 3 pillars are very straightforward. And the most important one to Brent and I is right in the middle, which is that 21st century workforce. We are in a competition with every other state and every other community to attract 21st century workers. How do we do that? Because we've got great jobs, we have to build healthy, vibrant communities that will help attract and retain those families. And when we do that, one of the #1 concerns of people that anywhere is what's it going to cost for me to live there? One of those costs is what are my transportation costs? What are my education costs? What are my healthcare costs? And what are my property tax costs? What's it cost to live in a place? And with smart, efficient infrastructure, we can help drive costs down and make our state more competitive for that workforce. Again, as we said in the State of the State, we have unlimited promise and potential. And the only thing that's gating us from having an incredible future is really our ability to work collaboratively together to solve problems, and our ability to learn and understand that the things that we've done in the past will not necessarily work in the future, that we need new approaches and new ideas to help us move forward. But we only reach our unlimited promise and potential as a state if every community reaches their potential. And that's why it's so important that we've got so many community leaders here today that are embarking on this journey to help the state reach its full potential. One of the things when we've talked about within our cabinet leadership at the state is, why do we come to work every day? What is our purpose? What is it that we really do? I mean, yes, of course, we deliver education and healthcare and services and infrastructure, and we provide funding and have programs. But at the end of the day, what we're about at Team North Dakota is we're about empowering people. We're about empowering people like you who might be wearing 5 different hats in your community. You might be a city council leader. You might be on your church board. You might also be a volunteer fireman or an EMS individual. When we've gone out to these communities for the learning associated with Main Street, it's often that the people that are around the table that they're engaged hold 3 or 4 or 5 different positions in their community. It's one of the things that's amazing about North Dakota. We've got to broaden the number of people that are engaged in leadership positions. We've got to make sure that we're moving our state forward through innovation, not regulation that holds people back. We've got to be focusing on improving their lives. And then we have to be willing to look at examples from other states, other nations, and even cities within our state and be inspired by their success as opposed to be jealous of their success. We have to hold the people up that are doing the great work and say we can learn from them and adopt those best practices and spread them rapidly. One of the things in a world of digital transformation, one of the keys to success is being a fast follower. Learning what's working and figuring out how to adapt that in your situation and go quickly with it. That's one of the keys to live in the dynamic world that we're in. And so when we inspire, when success is inspiring, we want to adopt it and transfer that quickly. So empower people, improve lives, inspire success. Those are the 6 words that get all of us on Team North Dakota up and coming to work every day to serve you in North Dakota. Let's just talk about communities for a second. And building communities for the future. But to do that, I think it's fun to go back and look at communities in the past. And maybe it's not that fun to look at a community that was buried in 12 feet of volcanic ash, and everybody died a horrible death. But there was one thing that came from the whole incident of Mount Vesuvius exploding and Pompeii being covered with toxic gases and 12 feet of ash, was that it was preserved all the way up to the 1600s. Over 1,500 years later, perfect preservation of the building capability that the Roman Empire had around the early part of the centuries labeled AD. And so it is interesting for us to look at this, because here's an empire that lasted almost 500 years. They expanded to multiple continents, but everywhere they went, they left this incredible engineering and architecture and infrastructure as an example of what they were able to do thousands of years ago, before computers, before all of the modern tools that we have for construction. It's really quite remarkable. And what we can take from this is that every city that we live in today has its roots back essentially in early Roman architecture and city design. These cities, we've got streets built on quadrants, we've got city centers, we've got public spaces, we've got large arterials that flow into smaller roads. We have all those things. One thing we don't have that they have was, and you'd say, wow, look at that road construction. That thing was really built to last. That lasted a couple thousand years. It didn't just last, 20 years and then we have to go out and repave it. How did they manage to have the wealth to be able to build things to last? Well, one of the ways they had to be able to build things to last was they also were providing literally physical protection. They had walls around these cities, and the walls were the things that almost always got built first. But those walls created an urban growth boundary, if you will, and so the infrastructure inside those walls could be really, really, really good and last a really long time, because they weren't trying to cover, a whole region with poor roads. They were trying to cover a small area with great stuff and great buildings and great coliseums and great theaters and great amphitheaters and great infrastructure. That's what they did. So they effectively did it because it was about human safety, but they ended up with a highly economic model where they were able to build really great communities that often had vertical elements to them as opposed to all horizontal elements, because they realized that was the most efficient use of infrastructure. An interesting little design feature, if you look down that road in the slide that's up right now and you see those big rocks on there, and you might think, oh, that's really goofy. Why do they have those rocks in the road? Those actually are stepping stones. So when the streets were filled with water, you could walk from one elevated sidewalk to the other without getting wet, and the stones were set at exactly the right level so wheeled carts could go down them and straddle those at a height and a width that they weren't affected by those stones. So, I don't want to say they thought of everything, but they really had some great design elements. This is an example from about 100 miles north of Madrid in Segovia, Spain. And this is, again, aqueducts. We talk about the infrastructure that we're trying to build today. Water is really important in a state like ours. There's 167 arches that are still standing out of this thing. It was built with almost no mortar, built by pure granite. The arches on the top are of consistent height. The arches on the bottom go up and down in their height based on the undulation of the ground, and then the combination of all the changes below are insulated, and this thing went nearly 17 miles from the mountains into town with a perfect 1% grade slope, and it carried water up until the mid-1800s. This is a piece of water infrastructure that lasted 1,800 years. Can you imagine? Think about, have we built anything in this state that we expect to be around 100 years from now? Think about that. It's a pretty short list. But this is how people were thinking about being built to last. The other thing that's interesting with Google Maps, you can look at this thing from the top, and one of the things that's masked behind the arches here that I don't think the original builders actually thought of is there's actually a McDonald's just blocked out of view on the other side, so the golden arches are blocked by these Roman arches, but check it out if you want to go look at that. Okay, but that was then. That was built to last pre-technology. Now we're in an era where there's an unbelievable amount of change. We have this new era that's being driven and changed in ways that it's hard for almost anyone to fully comprehend the speed of the change that's occurring. And it's being driven by underlying forces of technology that change the economics of every job, every company, and every industry. And those forces are actually unstoppable because forces of economics always erode and win. Economics can tear down ideology, they can tear down countries, they can knock down, the Berlin Wall. They can go through just about anything. It's like water flowing downhill. Economics very hard to change or stop. But what's driving it? I mean, at a base level, incredibly cheap storage. Let's just think about it as free storage, because all of you can store all your videos, the rest of your life for free online, and it's supported by an advertising model at no cost to you. That's just amazing. Gigabit internet is maybe we should think about this 10 gigabit or 100 gigabit, but I mean the powers and speed at which we're able to move data now versus where we were able to move 10 or 15 years ago, and it keeps moving up, and that's going to change everything. I mean, I just saw an article today that said, hey, reading text may actually be a dying art form. We used to send text because text took up very little room, but now we can do audio, which takes up a little more. We can send video. I mean, pretty soon people are just going to be consuming video snippets versus text messages, and that's starting to happen with apps like Snapchat and others that wouldn't even have been conceivable 10 years ago because there wouldn't have been the bandwidth for everybody to be sending billions of short videos to each other. And we know when a picture's worth 1,000 words. I don't know what a video's worth, but again, the transfer of knowledge is just accelerating when we've got the cheap storage plus the fast internet. The ubiquitous automatic sensors, this was the one which some people don't actually understand, but if you've got a smartphone, AKA a supercomputer in your pocket, you are transmitting data about all kinds of things. You're transmitting data about what you buy and where you shop and how long you stay there and what speeds you go and where you've been. All of these things are, so you are carrying an automatic sensor, but every industry from agriculture, when we can tag every cow and detect animal health based on how fast they're walking versus the rest of the herd in a feedlot versus having a guy and a horse riding out there, a pen rider, which is what they do at the large feedlots today to try to identify, is that cow sick or that cow sick? I mean, these things are, technology is changing even the things that are unconceivable. The way we deliver health care, the way we do all kinds of stuff, it has to change the way we manage our infrastructure in our state. I was at the Water Commission last week, and we were talking about some of our 1970s rural water infrastructures, and there was some estimate that we might be having, in some cases, more than 50% of the water we're pumping out is actually leaking out in the ground somewhere along the way, and we don't even know it because we don't have enough sensors along the system to be able to figure that out. But if you got 2,700 miles of 1970 pipe in the ground whose joints are eroding because the PVC joints are breaking, we probably need automatic sensors to be able to figure out how to track that. So, and again, pervasive mobility, I mean, the numbers are just exploding worldwide. Countries that never even had any technology infrastructure, people at the lowest income schedules have got mobility and smartphones. They're using it for banking. They're using it for all kinds of applications. We're here in the advanced world, we're still driving a car to a drive-through, and we got people that don't own a car and there isn't a physical bank or using their smartphone for their banking application. So people are leapfrogging us, and it's not even a function of income. But all of this gets tied together by what I call the magic of software, software being the most powerful tool that's ever been created to expand the capability of humankind. And then that software is getting better and smarter with machine learning, so it can learn and learn and learn and learn from itself and learn from all the activities you do. And then you apply artificial intelligence, and then all of a sudden all of the capability is just going to keep accelerating. And it doesn't accelerate at a linear level, it accelerates at a geometric level. And when it goes geometrically, that's why it's hard for humans, because we think the future is going to change at the same rate as the past. We humans think linear change, and this digital thing is going like this, and none of us, our brains aren't wired to think about something that gets twice as fast every 18 months at half the cost. It's hard to get our heads around the fact that when my daughter was shopping for her school shopping list with pens and paper and notebooks, that they wanted her to get a 8 gigabyte jump drive, which in 1983, when we were starting Great Plains, that would have been $8 million of storage. And it was on her little list with the pencils, okay? It's hard to get your head around how fast that has changed. But anyway, it's driving everything. And it's going to change, it's changing the energy industry. The energy industry in North Dakota is amazing. They're dropping their break-even point. We're back about to what we were producing in barrels per day in 2014, but when we're doing it today, now we're doing it with twice as much gas as we did. Twice as much gas coming out of those wells as we did with the same amount of oil. Amazing things that are happening there. Agriculture, you know, when we talk about autonomous vehicles to people that live in our largest cities, all I run into is doubters. Get out in the country, go talk to farmers that already have most of their machinery running autonomously or nearly autonomously. The ag sector in North Dakota is way ahead on autonomous activity. Two areas that have had a lot of federal interaction, healthcare and education, are two areas that are ripe for digital disruption. They've been held back by a lot of federal regulation, but if some of that federal regulation gets stripped away, we're going to actually could see costs coming down in healthcare and education, as opposed to those being the leaders rising faster than inflation like they have for the last 2 or 3 decades. They could actually have costs coming down, but all kinds of new forms of competition in healthcare and new forms of competition in education. So digital transformation is changing everything, and as I said earlier, if it changes healthcare and education, that means it's changing the largest employers in your community in ways that may not be completely foreseen, but it'll be creating changes and challenges relative to workforce. That digital disruption also is going to change the cities that we live in, and it's going to change them in lots and lots of different ways, and one of the ways it's going to change them is through collaborative consumption, because when you live in a city where everybody's got a smartphone, everybody knows location, we can start sharing stuff. It's been in agriculture for a long time, custom combining. Why own a $700,000 combine when you can hire it out for the 2 weeks a year that you need, or now it's 1 week because the combines are so big and so fast, they cover ground so quickly that, you know, why would you own a $700,000 asset and then have to build a building to park it when you could collaboratively consume it? And so custom combining has probably been the longest standing collaborative consumption model in North Dakota. But I had some experience when I was a kid. When I was 19, I hitchhiked to Alaska. And if I was really smart on this trip, as I was sitting here pondering the self-portrait, I would have predicted the smartphone and invented Uber. And I would have just, you know, got on my phone and said, hey, I want to go to Alaska, and I would have called them up and someone would have showed up and driven me there. But this is the collaborative consumption of shared transportation is changing the economics of our cities so rapidly, and it's just, again, when we've got a few cities here in our state that has it, but understand there was over 3 billion rides given on Uber a couple years ago. Lyft is a competitive startup, and they did 350 million rides. Zipcar is a model where you don't own a car. There's stations, and then you have a membership, and you go use the car when you want it, and you bring it back. But you don't have to go through a rental car agreement and all these other things. You just go to the station, grab your car, and go. And these Zipcar stations will start showing up, and that's against a background of the B cycle, you know, in Fargo, the ride share in Fargo, where they've got you know, a dozen bike stations around, which are collaborative consumption. Every kid at NDSU can use their activity card to go get a ride on the bike. Do you know how many rides have been on those bikes in Fargo? 347,845 rides have been on those bikes since we started. That's 347,000 times 2 that you don't need a parking spot on each end, because someone's riding a bike and they put it back in the station, which doesn't consume a parking spot. And so, you know, Zipcar, 1 million members in 500 cities, you know, in 2016, and I don't think they're even in North Dakota yet. And so we've got, these things are coming, they're gonna come, and they will help change the costs that we have in our cities. And part of it, I think, anybody that's bought a new car, it doesn't have to be a luxury car. If you're like my youngest son, who's got a relatively new Subaru, which I got a chance to drive, that little Subaru, you know, low-end model Subaru, it's got cruise control that's adaptive. You know, if you're coming up on the car in front of you, it slows you down. If you start drifting off the lane, it turns the steering wheel back in. I'm not talking about a $200,000 Tesla. I'm talking about a $27,000 Subaru has nearly got autonomous driving on the thing. And so all of this stuff is coming, and it's coming faster than we realize, and how transportation changes is going to change North Dakota, because we are like one big community. We're 750,000 people in our state. There are nearly 80 MSAs in the country that have more people than we do. But they don't have to build an interstate highway system and a state highway system and all the things we have to do, because we're not that big of a community, but we consume a lot of space. But all of this will make a huge difference in our state. You know, trucking and automation, all of that. Airbnb is another example. You know, one of the classic things that happen in terms of developing cities was you get federal funds, you put in a road, and then along comes the 100-unit hotel that plops alongside. They got a business model with the free breakfast and limited service. I mean, that model's been working for the last 30 years in America, and it was sort of a signature, hey, if you got those, you were really there as a community. And then Airbnb comes out of nowhere. I mean, only founded 7 years ago, and there was 4 million homes listed on this thing. They've rented, over the holidays, they rented more units than all the top brands combined. Hyatt, Hilton, Radisson wouldn't be a top 5, but Hyatt, Hilton, Sheraton, I mean, you name all the top groups, Marriott. Airbnb did more than all of them. And these folks thought they had locked in competitive advantage because they owed the best resale, the best real estate on the best corners in the places where they thought they could command the higher prices, and then along comes smartphones and geolocation and collaborative consumption, and the model is completely blowing up the hotel industry where they thought they had insurmountable competitive advantage due to location. Digital technology changes everything. There isn't a single industry that's safe because of digital disruption. So we have to start thinking about how that's going to affect our cities. And what does a smart city look like? It's smart everything. It's smart health, smart education, smart buildings, smart manufacturing. It's about mobility and Wi-Fi. It's about having a smart grid for energy and managing that. It's about having open data, open and transparent data so that people can learn from all of the large data that's being collected. It's having smart digital citizens who know how to interact in a way. There's so many different opportunities for us, and I would just have to say that my sense is that we're behind on all this and the change happening. So we've got to do some work to do. I believe that we can get to the front, but I wouldn't say that we're leading in this thing. So anyway, we've got a lot of good assets we can build on because we've done a nice job of putting core infrastructure in for high-speed internet. That helps, but we need leaders in every size community and every organization to make sure that they're on top of this. So let's just talk about the 3 pillars of MSI, and we'll go through each of these. The first one being workforce. There are, as you know, an estimate that there's nearly 13,000 jobs open in the state, and I say that with some skepticism because this is pulling, from Job Service, LinkedIn, and Indeed, but there's also Monster, there's Career Builder, there's also people that don't post online, and there's also organizations that we know of that if they have 5 nursing jobs open, they post 1, they don't post 5. Because when they fill the 1, they just leave the posting open, as opposed to paying for 5 openings. So absolutely, positively, this is a low number. So let's just, some people think the number could be double this, some people think it could be more than that, but let's just say conservatively it's a little bigger than this. I keep using Jamestown. If we filled these jobs, it'd be like adding a Jamestown to North Dakota tomorrow. And private sector organizations do not post jobs unless when they are filled, they actually make more money than they did the day before. So this is actually a gating factor which is slowing down our growth and our potential as a state. So all of us together need to work to try to figure out how to do that. And in the 21st century, people that can understand how to use 21st century tools and understand 21st century approaches are highly, highly mobile. They can live anywhere they want. And the way it also works these days is when people pick the city they want to live in, then they go look for the job. When I graduated from NDSU, if someone, probably the top job you could get was at IBM. I didn't get one of those, but anyway, if you could get a top job like at IBM, you'd ask someone, oh, you're going to work for IBM, where are you going to work? And they'd say, wherever IBM tells me. I mean, it could have been Rochester, New York, or Rochester, Minnesota, but it was a top-down hierarchical military model, which is you join us and we'll tell you where you're going to go, and you might have to move every 2 or 4 years. That is not happening today in corporate America. It's certainly not happening in the tech world. In the tech world, it's like you ask somebody, where do you want to live? And then go, okay, we don't have a location there, but maybe we'll let you work remote. I mean, people hire people even when they don't have facilities in that community because they're hiring the talent as opposed to insisting they come to a location. So we have to compete on location. We have to compete on having healthy, vibrant cities, or these job numbers are just going to go up and up and up, and we're going to end up losing out to other states and other places that are building healthy, vibrant communities where people want to live. So this is the core of the competition. And Jim Clifton, Chairman and CEO of the Jobs War, says it pretty simply, which is that it's the battle is going to be between places that have great education, great local leaders, and great communities to live. That's where the battle is going to take on, and we have to do that. And particularly, some of the folks are going to want to live in a large metro area, and we don't have a large metro area in our state. We don't have an NFL town. We don't have an MLB town, Major League Baseball. We don't have that. I mean, collectively, like I said, altogether, the whole state isn't big enough to be a market to get an NFL team. So we have to compete differently, and we have to compete, and there's ways we can, and we can compete and win. But as we do that, we have to look at the fact that, this job opportunities with the 12,000, almost 13,000 job openings, they're not distributed equally. I have got some land in Slope County. I saw some of my friends and neighbors from there last weekend. I did ask them, do you know of any jobs open in Slope County? They didn't, so this data might actually be correct. There's 0 jobs open in Slope County, which is disappointing to me, but it's a beautiful part of our state. But then if you flip around and look at our major metro areas, Bismarck, Grand Forks, Fargo, and others, then you start to look at the concentrations. The darker blue, you've got lots of jobs. Our largest in Cass County, over 4,200 jobs available in there. Then it goes down to the less blue color, then the green, and then the yellow color is places that have less than 33 jobs open. So it's not evenly distributed. If you're from one of those counties that's a light yellow, you've got a different set of challenges than some of the other places do. And part of Main Street is figuring out, the Main Street Initiative is figuring out what's your starting point and how do you go up from there, because we realize not all communities are beginning from the same point. One of the things that we're working on is one of our initiatives is transforming education. And as part of that, the Lieutenant Governor and I are committed to getting to all 11 campuses this year. We've been to 3 in the last 2 weeks. We've been to North Dakota State School of Science. We've been to Minot State University. We've been to NDSU. And understanding what's the relationship between the billions that we spend in education in higher ed and filling these workforce jobs, and we got plenty of work to do there. We're also taking a look at K through 12 because we also spend billions on K through 12 education across our state every biennium, and we have to understand what are we doing at that level to make sure that we're beginning at that level of engaging the youth so they understand what are careers, what are opportunities, what are available in our communities, because we don't want to have really great education systems that just help export talent to other states. We've got to create great education systems, but at the same time, we've got to be listening to those students to say, what kind of communities would it be interesting for you? How could we make it interesting enough for you to stay in our state? Along that line, we've got coming up our second Governor's Innovative Education Summit. It's going to happen June 6th through 7th at Northern Cass. If you're an educator, if you're an employer, if you're got kids in school, if you're a parent, you're welcome to come with this thing. And you can sign up at nd.gov DPI. Would love to have you there. And of course, Northern Cass is a fine school built in the middle of nowhere that includes my hometown of Arthur's kids go there, and most of the people that we used to play against, our competitors, all now go to the same consolidated school. It's very confusing to me, but they're all one team now. We've also got to transform higher education, and again, at understanding some of the great things that are going on relative to workforce development at our state College of Science down in Wahpeton. There are kids graduating from programs down there. When they graduate from the program, they can have anywhere from 4 to 10 job offers, getting paid a lot of money in trades. And because the private sector is so desperate for these jobs, I had a chance to walk into lab after lab that was filled up. This one's filled up with CAT equipment. This one's filled up with John Deere equipment. This one's filled up with Case IH equipment. Then we go, over to the HVAC. Here's one that's got all the latest, train equipment for, HVAC equipment. Then you open up one of these new units, and what do you see inside there? Circuit boards. That's what you see, circuit boards. I saw a kid, he's got Bluetooth. He's got a Bluetooth thing to an iPad, and he's the furnace repairman. The technology that's embedded in these jobs is getting so deep that you almost need to be a software engineer to work on the equipment, because there's so much computing power in every one of these things, and we're not producing enough people to even fill the jobs that we have here in the state when there's all kinds of demand for it. So we have to look at the demand signals from industry, and we have to think about how we're spending dollars to help fill this workforce. Let's talk about the second one, communities. We talk about vibrant, healthy communities. It would be important to try to define what vibrant is, because so we all are on the same page, but vibrant includes that it is walkable, because when you can walk, then you can interact with other people. It's got mixed use, some element of mixed use density, which means that in the same neighborhood or on the same block or even in the same building, you might have retail and residential. You might have retail and commercial. You might have different elements in the same place. And we talk about being an 18-hour city. We're not going to be New York or LA. We're not going to be 24-hour cities where things are going year-round, but I mean, all night long or this and that. But in some of our cities in our state, you know, we have to have the person that, you know, lands at the plane to come visit our state, and they get in at 10:30 at night, that there is actually maybe still a restaurant open or a bar that's still serving food. I mean, you know, as opposed to when they get here, then they're literally like, there's nothing to do at 10:30 at night. So, and then in the next morning, if they want to get together and have a breakfast meeting at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., you know, you'd like to have some place for them to be able to do that in the morning. So it's this 18-hour idea that helps create some vibrancy. Historic renovation and new infill. We've got a lot of amazing historic buildings across our state. When I go to a community that has saved a historic building, there's a sense of pride, there's a sense of emotion, there's a sense of optimism. And when I go to a place where they've lost a historic building, or the roof has just fallen in, or the city council has just voted to tear it down because they can't afford to maintain it, you can feel the grieving that's going on in that community, because it ties us to our roots, which aren't that deep. A lot of these communities have only been around for 100 years, and we're even losing the connection of the early settlers that built these buildings, some of which were built to last. Some of those buildings that we're knocking down were built way better than the ones we're replacing them with. So the historic renovation plays a piece in that, and that's why the Historic Society and others are on this long list of partners in MSI. And then again, daytime and evening utilization. You know, if you've got a downtown that is, you know, active during the day with, you know, banks and real estate agents, and then at 5 o'clock they all shut their doors and go home, and then somebody comes to your community and there's nothing open after 5 p.m., you know, that's that again, it's a signal about vibrancy, which could be fine, everyone could like it, but, you know, I just say, you know, it's part of, think about recruiting someone to come and live in your town. This is not an ideology that I'm presenting. This is a how do you attract a workforce solution. And so if you want to attract workforce, then these are some of the elements that you have to think about, building on the elements that you have: culture, music, experiences. You need to find your differentiator, whatever that differentiator might be. You've got to find something that if somebody said to you, hey, I've got a great job, it would involve living in your community, why should I move to your community? What would I be going on there? I think when we answer those questions, sometimes what we're answering that question, if you've asked it in your own community, we're answering with programming, which is why the programming matters as much as the physical buildings. But the program, whether it's the tribal tourism and the Little Shell Powwow up at Newtown, whether it's things like the Red River Market and Chris Kindle Mart, that Folkways is doing programs in Fargo, whether it's the New Rockford Opera House and all the amazing stuff that Deb Belquist is doing with retail and coffee shops, and driving thousands or tens of thousands of people to New Rockford for arts events around the year, or the Dickens Festival, you know, with its Garrison, just all in. I mean, all in. I mean, here, you should love it. 20 years ago, they said, what are we going to do? It's freezing cold in Garrison in December like the rest of North Dakota. Are we going to sit home and whine about it? No, we're going to buy a double-decker red bus from London. We're going to have parades. We're going to have street fairs. We're going to have, a phone booth that look like the ones in London, so that young people can go, what's a phone booth? Anyway, they're all in, and draws thousands of people to this unique winter festival. So, I mean, there's things that people are doing in their communities through programming, but we've also got these incredible assets as a state, because we're here to talk about Main Street, but Main Street isn't just about the physical Main Street. Main Street is about how do we attract workforce and build strong, vibrant, healthy communities. And some people live in your community. I know they live in your community because they want to have close access to what North Dakota also offers, which is the great outdoors. And we offer these, incredible opportunities, with hunting and fishing and wildlife and birding and all the things, whatever. And so having access to that, we've got all these state parks. And we've got some cases like Garrison, who's got a really tight relationship with Stevenson State Park. They collaborate together, it almost forms one community. We have other places where we've got state parks in North Dakota that are near communities, and the interaction is less strong or solid. So there is an opportunity. I know our Parks Department is here, but there is opportunities to, with wildlife management areas, with our game and fish who's here, with the Parks, for your community to have tighter relationships and for us to drive more utilization out of these state assets as we help you build differentiated, interesting communities. The other thing is, if that's vibrancy, let's talk about health. Part about health is actually walking. I mean, North Dakota has a higher than it should have relative our population, relative to the rest of the country, incidence of diabetes, incidences of heart attacks, and heart health issues. And part of that is, you might say, well, some of it's explained by, genetics and ancestry, but some of it is explained by culturally, by not only just what we eat, but it's also explained by the fact that we believe that we have an entitlement about parking right next to the door all the time. I mean, that is a God-given right of a North Dakotan, and if you can't park by the door, then there's something wrong, and people ought to be voted out of office. And it is, so the walkability thing is something that we need to understand, that the simple things of just changing our attitude. It's okay to walk a half a block or a block. It's okay to walk 2 blocks. It's okay to park on the far side of the parking lot and get more steps in. And with the automatic continuous sensors, either on your phone or your Fitbit or whatever, some people are starting to culturally change that. We're seeing adults saying, hey, I need to get my steps in today. That sends you down a different design path for your city than if you're if your whole goal of a transportation system is to eliminate walking, you come up with a very different design than if you say walking is good for all of us. Walking equals health, equals long-term health, it's brain health, all that stuff. But then you have to do it in an environment where it has utility. You don't want to just walk. Instead of going to the gym, I'm going to walk. How about if you walked for utility, like I'm walking to work, I'm walking to get groceries, I'm walking my kid to school. That's walking with utility, as opposed to trying to find the time to go for a walk, and it's a painful thing like going to the gym, only colder. But anyway, and we want to make sure we got environments that are safety. We've got to focus, on addiction, behavioral health, preventative medicine, which I'm not sure is spelled correctly, but spelling's not my strong suit, but that was a test to see if you guys are still paying attention. But okay, but anyway, in vibrant neighborhoods, this isn't just, again, Main Street is not just about downtowns. It's about neighborhoods. Does the neighborhood you live in have a name? Does it have a brand? Does it have a sense of community? Does it have a neighborhood organization? And does it have trees? Because I just take a moment to talk about trees, because again, we've got the forestry department is a partner here. We got USDA, there's lots of places, and we don't often talk about this thing, but there's been studies done that say the more trees you have, the higher the real estate value. And you might say that's interesting. Some of those say anywhere from 3% to 9% higher real estate value if you've got a neighborhood with a continuous canopy like this one shown here. As opposed to just, some little teeny trees. Where are we putting all the new housing? We're putting new housing out on the edge in North Dakota. What does that mean in the Great Plains? It means virtually no trees or little teeny trees. Does that help us attract workforce to our state? Not necessarily it does. I mean, guys like me that grew up in Arthur, actually love the idea of the unbroken plain and the sunsets. It's not for everybody. Some people that we're trying to attract to work here or stay here actually think trees are nice. They do help lower your heating and cooling costs. They get you out of the wind. There's a reason why if you were going to go camping, you would pick a chance to, camp or build your village in a wind-protected area in the trees. That would be where you would pick. One of the other studies that was done recently said that the value of trees shading a house increased the value of the house it was in Portland, by 3%. That equaled almost $8,800 per house, but each tree, a large tree could shield, 2.2 houses. So there's about $20,000 of additional value because of the treed area. Then they multiplied that times the area they had trees. It ended up for the city over $1 billion increase in property values because of the trees. And then, of course, there's property tax on that. And so then you're generating all kinds of property tax, which helps fuel things that would do that. And there are some, programs like, Tree City USA, but I think that, it's like spending pennies per capita, to plant some trees. There are some places that have just gone all in. Maybe your community would decide our differentiators, we're going to go all in and we're going to plant, 100 trees, 1,000 trees. I mean, this is something that you could choose to do, and you could choose to plant 1,000 trees, versus extend infrastructure further out on the edge, and without taxes going up. These are choices. These are design choices that people can make. We're good. Again, we're building on great stuff. We've got Tom Sorrell, head of the North Dakota DOT here, and a bunch of people from his team. We have a fantastic North Dakota DOT. They've done amazing work. We just got a report this week, national report, North Dakota, #1 in the country in highway performance, talking about the roads and the maintenance and all the things that we're doing. So that's fantastic. Congratulations to the DOT. And the DOT is working very hard to interact with your communities, because what we want to do is make sure when we're spending the money, which it was over $5 billion we've spent in the last 10 years on state funded, then the Fed dollars come in on top of that, so enormous dollars have gone into highway infrastructure. We want to build something that helps increase the value of your community, helps you attract a workforce. We don't just want to be spending money on bypasses or things that steer traffic and people away from your community. We want to make sure that we're being smart about how our intersection of our dollars intersects with you. And if we've got roads that are running through your community, like wherever a US highway or a state highway, also like in North Dakota, in Arthur, where I grew up, Highway 18 is also our main street. When we intersect on that stuff, in general, in a place like that, faster and wider would reduce the value of everything on Main Street in Arthur. Slower and narrower would increase the value, and so we want to make sure that we're not just optimizing for automobiles that are passing through. We want to optimize for people that live there. We want to optimize for the property owners. We want to have a broader understanding of what the return on investment is, because in the United States, the focus on highway investments has been more cars faster was always the target, and we have to rethink that as being the design goal that we're going for, because more cars faster can actually have the inverse effect on building healthy, vibrant communities. One area that Tom and his team is also focused on, and they launched this in conjunction with the health department recently, is Vision Zero. We're trying to be the first state to get to zero highway fatalities. We're #1 in highway performance. We're number 37 out of 50 in highway fatalities. And so this is something that we can all work on. This starts with personal responsibility, making sure that in your healthy community, as they say, friends don't let friends drive drunk or impaired. Parents and kids in high school hold each other accountable to not text and drive, distracted driving. There's lots of ways that we can do that, and we want to make sure that our highways are safe for people that aren't in cars, people on bicycles, people that are walking, because that's also included in this number. So we've got a lot of work to do, and of course 58% of the 113 people that died in 2016 weren't wearing a seatbelt, and nearly half of those were also related to alcohol. So there's things that we can work on in our communities, but this is not something this is something we want to focus on, and we can get there. And you might say it's an impossible goal. It's an impossible goal. We'll never get to zero. Tom asked the right question. What would be the right goal for your family? Is it one death? Is that the right goal for your family, or 2? No, it's 0. No, what's the right number for your kids' friends? It's 0. What's the right goal for people that live in Arthur? It's 0. And so we don't have a choice. We have to pick 0. We've got to work on it. And we will end up with some cities that go for a year without an auto death. We will end up with some counties that end up. We may have a week or 2 in our state where we go 2 weeks without one. We'll celebrate all of those things on our way to 0, and I think we can be the first state to get there. Okay, Recovery Reinvented, September 26, 2017. If you want to have a healthy city, you've got to understand the cost of addiction, and it's touching every community, every family, every organization. We don't know the full cost of it. I know that it's affecting the nation in the hundreds of billions. It's likely affecting North Dakota in the hundreds of millions to the billion category, because it touches so many things. This is a super successful event. 800 plus people were here. Great learning, great activity. Literally lives were saved coming out the back end of this with some of the work that was done. And so, credit to First Lady for her courage to stand up and talk about her journey to recovery. Powerful example for everybody in our state to have the courage to get up and try to make a difference. We have another Recovery Reinvented coming up September 5th at the Fargo Civic Center. Sign up, get involved, recoveryreinvented.com, but don't wait till September. There's things you can do right now. There was great work done with the collaboration with the legislature, with the judicial branch, with the executive branch, with a number of our agencies, particularly with Human Services and Chris Jones and Pam Sagnas and the work that we're doing on behavioral health. But one of the things through the Justice Reinvestment Act, moving dollars out of corrections, where it costs us $41,000 a year to incarcerate someone, moving that upstream to lower cost and more effective solutions, which is good for the taxpayer and good for the individual. 75% of the people in our correction system have an addiction, is recovery community organizations. There's a brand around this called Free Through Recovery. You can learn more at the Department of Human Services website or at recoveryreinvented.com. But if you're a small community, and if you're one of the communities we've met, every place we've met, we said we do not have enough behavioral health specialists. We don't have a full MD psychiatrist anywhere west of Highway 83 in our state. We don't have enough beds in treatment facilities. One of the ways that you can try to fill those delivery of service gaps is through recovery community organizations, because it's been proven that peer-to-peer support is often just as effective as professional support. It's one of the elements. All kinds of organizations that maybe haven't been involved in this in the past can jump in and whatever, so learn more about that. And of course, the best dollars we spend is not on treatment and recovery. The best dollars we spend in terms of a return on investment is on prevention. And so we, like Recovery Reinvented, this is a focus day statewide event called Day of Prevention. It's going to be April 11th, 2018. Register at recoveryreinvented.com. Get there, get people from your community there, and learn about how you can have a healthier community in this regard. Because addiction is what's driving crime rates. It's what's driving all kinds of costs in our judicial and in correction systems. And we've got to try to get upstream and help people who have the disease of addiction. Got some good news that we have. One of the pieces of really good news is that North Dakota leads the country. This is just out, new Brookings Institute study. We lead the country substantially in terms of the growth of young adults. So this is people that are 18 to 34, number one, during that decade leading up. This is data that only goes through 2010. I believe that from 2010 to now, with everything we've got going on, we're likely still leading this thing. That's great. There's another study that came out just recently that actually said that we're slightly ahead of some other states now in terms of the highest percentage of millennials as part of our population of the state. And it's counting millennials as people that are 21 to 37. And so if that's becoming the largest segment of our workforce is millennials age 21 to 37, if it's becoming this substantial portion of our population, then the question that you have to ask as a community is how many people between age of 21 and 37 do you have engaged in discussions about where is your community going and what's it going to look like and what's it going to be? Because one of the things one of the learnings when we've gone out to listen to communities is we get out to these communities and we know what the average age is in the community, and then we know the people we're meeting with, and guess what? The people we're meeting with are a little bit older than the average age of the community, maybe substantially older. And it's great that we've got people that are like super engaged and committed and spent their whole life trying to build community, but we've got to figure out a way to have deeper, stronger engagement with young people. And one of the things is just asking them questions. I say engagement, I'm talking about engaging with freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors at high school. Senior might be too late. They may have already decided I'm leaving this town and I'm leaving this state. That might be too late. So we've got to figure out engagement. Engagement could be just listening to them. Engagement could be asking them the question, what is it makes it interesting for them? And we've now been inviting high school kids to come to all of the listening sessions we're having with Main Street. It's been fascinating, and sometimes their voices have been the most important voice in the room. So this is a challenge to all of you today, is to make sure that in your community you're engaging youth. Economics is the key part of the first part was workforce, second part was healthy and vibrant, the third part is smart infrastructure. And like I said, we're very fortunate. The DOT last 10 years, state dollars, $5.4 billion. Federal dollars, it could be that high or higher. In water infrastructure, $2.7 billion from the state. So just in roads and water, our legislature has appropriated in the last 10 years, over $8 billion of investment into roads and water. This is incredible for a state our size. We should all be so grateful that we've had the economic prosperity we've had. We've had the boom, which has funded most of this stuff, but it's been incredible. But as we think about pouring those dollars back in, it's not just how much we spend and what we spend it on, it's also where we spend it. Because part of what we have to do if we're going to solve the work first issue is we know that we have to build healthy, vibrant communities, and we have the blueprint right in front of us, and it's called Every Town in North Dakota in the 1930s. Because if you go back and look at any town, look at any one of the 53 county seats and pull out a black and white photo of that incredible courthouse that was built by the early pioneers in that town, and look at the main streets of those towns, like in a Crosby. I mean, it's idyllic. You've got mixed-use vibrancy going on there. This is a shot from Bismarck, but you've got blue collar, white collar, manufacturing. You've got all of these things happening in one spot. You got people that are walking. You got a trolley car. You got automobiles. You got multimodal transportation, and all of it works economically because it's on a small footprint. We got places where our population has tripled, since the 1930s in some of our communities, but our footprint's grown by 10x. So, we have chosen through design decisions to each one of us as a taxpayer be covering a lot more ground with our tax dollars than what these folks were doing. And part of that is because coming out of World War II, we got into basically such a predominant view of how design should happen in cities. And that predominant design was, automobile dependent, single use. That was the design thing. That's the thing that when I've said before, we have to have the humility to understand that things we believe to be true may not be true. I think all of us thought this picture is the American dream, and we're doing everything we can to try to achieve that American dream. And we've done that. This is a picture that's either Southwest Fargo or Southwest West Fargo, but it is a neighborhood that has got, bike paths running down the middle. This picture was taken in August. It was 76 degrees, and I've gone over this thing with a microscope. There is not one biker, there is not one walker, there's not one person pushing a stroller, there's not one person in the little neighborhood playgrounds. And you know why? Because to do anything in a neighborhood like this, you got to get in the car, put your kids in the car seat, and then you got to drive, to gymnastics or the grocery store or the church or the school. And this single use itself, single use zoning was this idea that made sense in the 1920s when we had highly polluted industrial communities and people were getting sick, very sick, living close to industrial factories. So they said, we're going to create communities that are homes only and put them here, and then we're going to keep the dirty industrial stuff there. That idea doesn't necessarily apply to all, applies to very few areas in North Dakota where we've got the cleanest air and some of the cleanest water in the country. We need to start thinking about, why are we doing single use? What purpose does it serve? Does it help, auto manufacturers, none of which are located in North Dakota? Who does it help? And so then we need to think about that. And we can actually go back to our roots as a state and start designing and making sure that we've got things that are walkable mixed use as at the core to help attract and reuse the existing infrastructure we have. Most of the large cities we have and the small cities we have, any one of them I've been in, any size cities, there are empty lots in the downtown area because there were buildings there, they got knocked down. But the infrastructure is still there. The sidewalk is still there. The sewer is still there. Everything is still there. It still gets covered by the fire and police. And so we need to think about these infill opportunities to make use of the existing infrastructure. One example again of how the power of this is, there's one example from a building in Fargo. One floor, 9,000 square feet was being utilized. It got remodeled. It got a new floor added on top. The basement was excavated to become two different other businesses, including a restaurant. So you went from, now there's 48,000 square feet being utilized. It used to be the two businesses with 6 employees. Now there's 20 businesses with 120 employees. And the city of Fargo, for this economic engine that was created, spent $0 on sidewalk, 0 on sewer, 0 on new anything, 0 on new police, new fire, whatever. So design really matters. It matters a lot. It matters how we design our economic systems, how we design our incentive programs, and how we design our cities. And if you just say it very simply, if you plan cities for cars and traffic, you get cars and traffic. If you plan for people and places, you get people and places. And this is a shot of South Fargo. This is an intersection of U.S. Highway 81. Because it's a U.S. highway, it receives all kinds of federal matching funds, 80%. The state throws in another 10. The taxpayer in Fargo to build this only paid 10% of the cost. Does Fargo need something that is 7 lanes wide, 3 each way with a center turn lane. Okay, but now we've built it so wide, we got to have frontage roads. So we have a place in Fargo, a town that has, just over 100,000 people. We've got a thing that's got 11 lanes of pavement per mile with frontage roads. But when we drive by this thing, we don't even think anything of it because we somehow in our thinking think this equals progress, and you don't have to pick on anybody. If you look at the logos on this thing, what you're going to find is big box retailers and national franchises. You're not going to find a bunch of entrepreneurs parked on this thing, and you're not going to find anybody walking on this thing, because when you've got traffic speeds of 35, 40, 45, it becomes very deadly for pedestrians, and people just by choice to stop walking in that area. There actually was a pedestrian fatality on the street recently with a new American who probably didn't have a car. Okay, so then it disadvantages all kinds of folks. So bottom line is footprint drives cost. We need to understand that, and if people want to have small government, small property taxes, they need to pay attention to footprint. We've got examples like Bismarck, which is if you throw in Bismarck-Mandan in, the numbers get bigger, but Bismarck, that's not the extraterritorial zones, which have got lots of housing development on it. That's Bismarck itself compared to Iowa City and Missoula, which are similar sized cities with population, but they're getting it done in a smaller footprint. Fargo, sort of really jumps out on this thing. Fargo now has more square miles in its city limits than Boston or San Francisco. You throw in West Fargo and Moorhead, it's 83 square miles. But Boulder and Ann Arbor have similar populations, similar number of college students at half the footprint. And so therefore, when we checked on them, they've got about a third less fire and a third less police. And then they got faster response times. Less firemen, faster response times. How is that possible? It's possible because you've got way, 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 way less miles of road to navigate to get to where the people are living. So in summary on the high cost of sprawl, and this is a pattern in North Dakota, and this is meant in the spirit of learning, not in the spirit of criticism, but one of the things, the pattern that we have celebrated here is when we have enough resources to build a new school on the greenfield edge. And celebrate, my daughter went to one of these schools in Fargo, but we build a new school. The park amenity, follows it with a separate, taxing group. We add in the U.S. phenomena of residential zoning only for single family homes. We pay for new miles of sewer and water, even though we might have aging sewer and water in the older part of town that needs to be replaced. We put in new lights that have to be maintained. We find out that, public transportation doesn't work because the bus routes are too long and there's not enough riders. School bus costs go up. We just find out, like in Bismarck last winter, snow plowing takes longer, days sometimes, and then when you've got more loads and more loads per hour because you got to drive further to get it out of town, then you end up in the larger cities adding more firefighters with new fire stations, which the one in Fargo cost $7 million. The fire truck was $785,000. Then you need more waste management people, more full-time police. There's now more policemen in Fargo than there are state troopers in the whole state because of that breadth of that 49 square miles of trying to manage. So anyway, there's just a high cost of that sprawl. So and one of the other costs to this is also parking, because when we build all this stuff, you have to drive, and then when you have to drive, then you expect to be able to park someplace. And most of us have an expectation, without even thinking about it, that we demand in the course of a day or a week anywhere between 10 or 12 parking spots, because we think when we're going to park free at the Y, we're going to park free when we go to a restaurant, we're going to park free when we go to the mall, we want to park free when we go to church, we want to park free when we go to work. We want to park free when we go to our kids' events. We want to go, and we might want to park at the elementary school for a kid event in the morning and park free at the high school in the afternoon. And then and basically everywhere we are a state that expects free parking, and we expect it everywhere. So every car that gets bought and utilized needs to have, a 10 or 12 parking spots, available capacity at all times, 24-hour day to meet our needs. So what does that mean? It's roughly the size of Connecticut. You add up the value of that off-street parking, and that is more than the cost of all the cars in America. Okay, and you say, how is that possible? Well, a parking spot might cost, even if on worthless land on the edge, just the asphalt on the size parking spot might be $4,500. If you move to where costs get higher, a parking spot in North Dakota can cost $18,000 to $20,000 to build. Well, if you want 10 parking spots, then and you're driving a $20,000, $30,000 car, you expect there to be $200,000 of free parking available for you to park that asset. And that's just their expectation. We never run the numbers, we never talk about it. We do it, some of that cost of the off-street stuff is built into the price of your meal at the restaurant. Some of it's built into your property taxes when you're parking at the school. Some of it's built into other things where it's built in, but the real cost that we don't talk about is street parking, which we also expect. And street parking is a subsidy that's paid for by property taxpayers because it covers it's got to be plowed, it's got to be maintained. And in many of our cities, there's not just a little bit of street parking, there are hundreds of miles of street parking that are being paid for. So we are all in on parking, and it doesn't show up on anybody's, never shows up anywhere. It doesn't show up on any, where does it show up? On anybody's fiscal analysis or ROI. So we have to pay attention to parking and get that right, particularly in an environment where we're going to have autonomous vehicles and we're not going to need as much parking. The fact that we have all these parking spots could actually turn into an opportunity for us to do mixed-use infill back in the areas. Downtown Fargo alone's got 115 acres of surface parking today, all of which used to have 3- and 4-story buildings on it. All of it used to have mixed use on it. So there's a big opportunity. Walkability, if you're interested in this thing, you need to learn about this in your community, any size community. Free website. You go, you type in your address, you find out your walk score, and if you've got a high walk score, you have a walker's paradise. Someone could live there without a car. I know in North Dakota that's a really odd concept, but we're competing against places for workforce where millennials are choosing to live in cities where they don't need cars. Okay? We're competing against places where people want to live and don't use cars. Now, you might say, I don't know anybody that doesn't want to use a car. We love our cars. We love our drive. We love our commute. It doesn't matter if you don't know anybody. We're talking about how our state competes in the future, and we are competing for people that want to live places without cars. They may be for environmental reasons. Why would I own a car that I only drive 5% of the time? Why would I pay a car payment, when I could be spending that money on something else? And so there are people that are making choices that are different. This is the new generation of young people are buying cars at a lowest. Every generation bought more cars than the previous generation till now. Now they're buying less. In the Bay Area, car ownership is really dropping in California because with Uber and Lyft's availability of a collaborative consumption that they have, people that used to have families that had 3 cars now have 2. That just means, guess what? Car ownership could go down by 1/3 in places because the flex capacity they need for the 3rd car is really low and they can get by using collaborative consumption. Doesn't mean cars are going to go away, but it means the trend is changing and we've got to be aware the trend is changing. Walk score is one way. The higher your walk score, also the higher the real estate value, and if we're trying to drive smart, efficient cities that are financially solvent, we have to pay attention to this. Grand Forks, fantastic. They got a high school downtown that they didn't move to the edge. Hallelujah, Grand Forks Central, walk score 84, huge asset to have all those kids downtown. Let's figure out a way to help them figure out the future that they want in downtown. Grand Forks, Minot still got a facility downtown, walk score 82. Dickinson, doing some fun stuff downtown. The Blue 42 Sports Grill has got a 71 walk score. The Daily Addiction Coffee downtown in Williston, 72 walk score downtown. Even smaller towns like Garrison, doing some great stuff with their downtown. Met somebody in Garrison that was considering redoing the 2nd floor of an old building downtown and selling their home and moving into downtown Garrison. I mean, it can even happen in size communities like this where people want to live in walkable neighborhoods. Bismarck Event Center, where we are right now, surrounded by a sea of parking, is still got a high walk score because you get points if there's things within a 1/4 mile and a 1/2 mile and it reaches up to touch downtown. But what's the mistake that we keep doing over and over is school on the edge. Williston, I know they needed a new school. School, population, school attendance, going through the roof. We need a new school. We need a new school that's beautiful. Where do you put the new school? That's a big question. And we always default for the edge because the school board can get cheap land. That cheap land can turn out to be very expensive because it may or may not be supported by enough private investment. That's public investment going on new infrastructure. Legacy High School, public investment going on new infrastructure. Davies High School, where my daughter went. My daughter is now a senior in college. She went there 7 years ago as a sophomore when this school opened. It had a 0 walk score the day she opened. 7 years later, it has a 0 walk score. This thing, to get a zero walk score, you can't buy a can of pop or a candy bar within a mile of this thing. And if you're a teacher that's had a rough day, it's more than a mile to Frank's Lounge. So it's so anyway, we do this because we're buying cheap land, and then there's been some thought that the school district should be the one that is limiting cities' decisions about where they put infrastructure, where they provide incentives. I think it's actually the other way around. I think it needs to be collaborative, but if you're going to put a gating factor on decision making, this is what's really stretching infrastructure is the school stuff. But to understand that I'm culpable here as well, just like Davies, I built Microsoft out on the edge. I'm sure WalkScore didn't exist in 1997. I'm positive when I look back that we built a corporate campus in a zero WalkScore area because I did not know what I know today. 20 years later, with 2,000 of the highest paying jobs in North Dakota, it's got a 25 WalkScore, which means it is still an automobile dependent neighborhood. You build it and they will come does not work. It does not work. You would think this would be a magnet for restaurants and activity, whatever. This is a completely, basically not walkable neighborhood. We even, family member donated land for an elementary school next door, but elementary schools, you can't walk to an elementary school and shop. So I've been part of the mistake, is what I'm saying. I understand that. So what does it take us now going forward? This is the chart for policymakers. Existing infrastructure, meaning what we've already got, plus private capital, that's the highest return on investment for taxpayers. And it doesn't matter if you're in Larimore or Lemoore or Arthur or Garrison or Watford or Beulah, it doesn't matter. If you've got existing capital that's underutilized, you try to drive private capital to go to that existing infrastructure. And so school on the edge, it takes public funds to build the school, it takes public funds to build the infrastructure, low ROI. Downtown campus, I'm using the example of NDSU. That was some public, a lot of private donations to build the downtown campus on existing infrastructure. It drove, what now, 100 million or more of private capital in the area around it. New housing, new apartments, new everything that are being built. No cost to taxpayers for all this new stuff that's being built. That's a good use of public dollars to go into existing infrastructure and drive private investment. Big box retailer on the edge. Often big box retailers are only going to go next to high arterial roads. The high arterial roads, we get incented to be built because of the federal funding we get. We take the funding from the feds to build it, the 80% match, and then guess what? We get nothing for the feds for maintenance. So we get hooked into spending our dollars along with Fed dollars to build something. Who is the most vulnerable business model in America today? Big box retailers. At the front end, when I'm talking about the digital transformation, I did not talk about Amazon, but I could, because Amazon is disrupting every business model in America. You go out to rural North Dakota, try to find somebody that doesn't have an Amazon Prime account and is getting stuff delivered to their rural farm for free. Why would they drive into a big box retailer in one of our metro areas when they can have it delivered to their house? Okay, it is big box retailers used to be the catch that every city wanted to have. Let's get that. We're now on the map because we have this big box retailer. Their business model is completely vulnerable, and what are we going to do with the arterial roads and the empty big box retailers in 5 or 10 years? Because it's coming. I mean, Amazon and all the on-time retailers are disrupting it today. They've only captured 10% of the market. Only captured 10% of retail. 90% of retail is still physical. The online stuff, they're all moving that way, and maybe they'll turn them into distribution centers. But if Target and Kmart and all those guys all don't become online they all don't become Amazons, they're going to have huge challenges in the future because you cannot maintain all that physical presence and all those employees and compete with somebody that doesn't have it. The economics are too powerful. So anyway, this is a little roadmap for policymakers. Renaissance zones. Renaissance zone by definition in any cities, we got 57 cities that have developed Renaissance zones. I think, was it Larimore? Larimore might be at the top of the list. I think they had 57 projects. By definition, there's existing infrastructure or you don't have a Renaissance zone. By definition, you're attracting private capital to existing infrastructure. Run the numbers on those projects. They've all got high ROI. That's where we want to drive our capital. And then for the farmers that are here, or former farmers, it's all about thinking like yield, because the whole point of ROI for taxpayers is you want to figure out what is the property tax income that comes off an acre, a square foot, or a block. I mean, think about whatever your dimension is. Farmers think about acres. You know, what is the dimension? We want to have high revenue per acre, high revenue per block coming off. The height of these green bars indicate a lot of revenue coming off a block. Where is that coming from? It comes when we've got more density, mixed-use density, multi-story buildings. You know, then you might have, if you have even a small multi-story building, you might have 28,000 square feet on that infrastructure versus if it's a one-story, it's 7,000 square feet. So you automatically get, when you go vertical, you get better returns, which is like we did Back to the Future, like in the old cities. So we need to think like farmers. I mean, that's City of Fargo down there is the one I have right now. Here's Bismarck. We're playing with some of these with the GIS maps. There's Grand Forks, but in all cases, you know, you end up with the older neighborhoods are the cash cows that are generating the cash. And I would contend that the older neighborhoods are subsidizing the growth on the edge because we're not fully pricing out the growth on the edge at full cost to the people that are living there. They're getting subsidized by grandma and grandpa in the older neighborhoods. So the opportunity exists no matter the side. This is Beulah. We just pulled up on Zillow. I mean, you should do this in your own communities. There's so much available free data that's out there. This shows Beulah's got 3,100 people. I mean, you know, there might be a temptation to say, hey, we got a bunch of jobs open at the nearby plant. You know, we need to build new housing. But, you know, I think it's important before a city goes out and starts building a new subdivision on the edge to take a look at what's the opportunities that are already there and how do you collectively market what's there? How do you collectively market the vacant lots? How do you do infill? How do you do mixed-use infill? You know, because instead of building a 20 new home empty lots on the edge, you figure out a way to upgrade these in an infill and increase the existing neighborhoods. So again, there's the pillar: workforce, economics, and communities. And then some people have said, well, gee, this is just vision; it's not policy. This list behind me right now is the programs we've been able to find so far. Okay, this is everything from USDA to Department of Ag to DPI to higher ed to, you know, all of the people that have got something, 4-H, I mean, League of Cities. There are so many programs, and it is such a difficult labyrinth for people to navigate when they go through this thing. It's nearly impossible to get through it. So what we're trying to do with this grassroots effort, bottom up, communities volunteer. This is not a top-down thing. This is a bottoms-up thing, and it's cross-cutting across all these agencies. We're trying to figure out a way which of these programs work, which ones don't work. That's why we're out doing this active listening. We're listening to people and saying, you know, do you use these programs? They make sense. Part of our government reinvention is to get through that list, get rid of the ones that don't work, consolidate the ones that do, and provide a rational navigation path, whether it's with account managers or something, to help you as communities sort through that. And so we've been having these great visits. We've been to, you know, 14 places. We've got another dozen or more that have raised their hand and say, please, you know, come visit, from all sizes, including Flaxton, which has got about 70 people up in the northwestern part of the state. I'm looking forward to going there. Because if we can solve Flaxton's solution, we might have some ideas for Arthur, which is 350 people. So anyway, and then what's coming out of this? Some of the organizations, when we've left, what's really powerful is the leaders themselves that were all in the room for our meeting said, hey, we don't meet enough. We've got competing interests. We've got, you know, the chamber here and economic development here and the university there and the high school there and the hospital here, and everybody's got different boards. Maybe we should get together because we would all benefit if we could fill these nursing jobs and fill these manufacturing jobs. So they're, you know, getting together to try to figure out a way to have one vision for Jamestown. Devil's Lake, after we went there, they put together a plan for their downtown Devil's Lake with their infrastructure and street improvements. They're working with the DOT to do that. Valley City got a streetscape project improved, focusing on trying to get the streets right. Main Street in Hettinger, you know, we had like 60 people show up in Hettinger. They all got together afterward and said, we not only need a new one voice for Hettinger, we actually need new logos and new t-shirts. So this is the you know, getting in gear and heading gear as they figure out how they can approach in their thing. So one of, you know, things that we learned, key things that we learned was the key for student engagement at very early ages have got to do the youth engagement. If your community does not have some form of youth engagement, youth survey, youth connection between the business community, the city, and the high school, or if you're fortunate enough to have a university, we got to do that. Building, you know, tomorrow's leaders. We have students today that can lead today, and we need to expect more from our students today. If you've got a business like a bowling alley that went out of business in your town, and you can't find someone to run it, set up a program and have the kids' entrepreneurial program run it 2 nights a week. I mean, let the high school kids run it. Kids that are 16 or 17 can run a bowling alley, trust me. So figure out a way to get them engaged, get them involved in businesses. If you don't have a coffee shop on Main Street, have the students start a coffee shop. Let's stop doing kind of simulation entrepreneurial stuff. We can have them do real entrepreneurial stuff and learn real skills that may help them engage in the community. We got some places that are already doing this. But we are announcing the Main Street Initiative partnership with NDSU Extension and DPI about building tomorrow's leaders. This is a program that's existed, but as part of this, the final module in this program, students are going to be asked to design and implement a project under one of the 3 pillars of Main Street. So a great collaboration effort. Thank you, NDSU Extension and DPI for that. We want to make data-driven decisions. We've talked about that since the day Brent and I got elected. We've been saying to all of you, we're going to build community dashboards. People have said, what does that mean? We're getting ready to release the first versions of that. And so here's an example of one of those where we're going to put out stuff about households and age and commute and income and poverty and taxes that are levied and county tax comparisons. All these things some of this is going to be launched today at the conference, but we've also got a roadmap. So we've got the first release today on the fundamentals of planning. The second release is going to be coming out in March, and then following on that, we're going to get into livability additions, and then we're going to also have communities be able to edit and interact with your data coming later this year on these dashboards. But we've got to start making data-driven decisions so you understand the linear feet in your city, you understand what's really driving cost, and you can make smart decisions. Looking ahead, unlimited promise and potential, but it's all of us getting smarter and thinking about how we do this. If we can empower people, improve lives, inspire success, and do it with the right values, with gratitude, with humility, with curiosity, with the courage that we need to do that. But then you might still say to yourself, okay, that's all great, but we have all these disadvantages. It's cold here. It's 11 below this morning. We will never be able to compete with other cities. I want to provide a little inspiration on this cold day, which is I know that we can overcome this, and all we have to do is look beyond our borders. And we can look to someplace very close, Winnipeg. If you have not been to Winnipeg lately and you're a community builder, take the couple hours and drive to Winnipeg and see what Winnipeg has got going on. Winnipeg has 828,000 people in the metro area. Winnipeg has more people in their metro area than we have in our entire state. Winnipeg is 10 degrees colder on average than Bismarck, and Bismarck's warmer than Fargo. I mean, it is like cold in Winnipeg, but they embrace it. I mean, they have a thing on the Red River up there where all the top restaurants in town build these shanties on the ice and then serve these gourmet dinners, and it's a big festival on the ice. Minneapolis is grabbing itself with this whole new Bold North campaign that they're doing. This is an outdoor dining experience that they had recently in Minneapolis. There was a team, I don't know if there's anybody here, 16 people from the city of Fargo, including former city commissioner, former state legislators, private sector folks that were here. That went on this trip, 16 business leaders from the thing. They went to Oslo, Norway last week, and this is a town that is also further north than anything in North Dakota, and it is just cooking with activity that they're delivering, in a place that's darker and potentially colder than what we have. So anyway, it can be done, and it's being done in large metro areas, and we have to look to those examples as opposed to, the dream for North Dakota can't be, if I survive here long enough, someday, if I'm lucky enough, I'll get out of here and I'll be able to afford a place in Arizona. If that was defined as the North Dakota dream, we're in trouble, because that's not going to attract the 18 to 37-year-olds we need. We have to have a different vision, and that vision has to be that we're embracing and overcoming our disadvantages, turning them into assets. I was so excited in Grand Forks. Grand Forks has got this idea with the Freezeway. It's very timely now with the Olympics happening, but they're trying to create which will be the longest linear ice skating path in the country. Maybe there'll be a future, speed skaters coming out of Grand Forks on this thing, which would be very cool. They're going to run it along the riverside. That'll be very amazing. But that kind of opportunity, winter festivals available to any place in our state. So my challenge to all of you is, if you're here, I know you're already involved, but if your community is not signed up for MSI, which there must be some of you because there's 64 communities here and I think 29 are signed up, this is a bottoms up. Don't sign up unless you've got your local leadership ready to do and engage and do what you want to do. But if you do, it doesn't cost anything. Sign up and we can start working with you on a locally driven effort for you to build on your unique assets. And in closing, I would just say, you know, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world, or change a community, or change your community, because indeed it's the only thing that ever has. We need small groups of thoughtful, committed people to think differently, look at the data. It's not about ideology, it's how do we attract workforce, how do we build fiscally sound, financially sound communities, how do we build healthy, vibrant, safe communities. If we do that by empowering people, we'll improve lives, we'll inspire success, and we're going to have an absolutely amazing future. Thank you for being at the conference. Thanks for everything you do. And in your goal sheet, go learn, go meet, be curious, have fun. Thank you.
Wow, do you feel inspired? What I heard him say is unlimited promise and potential as a state. Do you firmly believe that? Yes, that was a really low yes. Yes, right? Unlimited promise and potential as a state. We're already making an amazing, making amazing things going on in North Dakota, and the promise and the potential to do even more is just right within our reach. So I'm so excited.